sociedade no mundo, nomeadamente a automação, a inovação tecnológica, a transição ecológica e digital, novas formas de trabalhar, o tão falado skills gap, portanto aquele fosso entre aquelas que são as competências desenvolvidas num ciclo de grau, ciclo de estudos que confere grau, e aquelas que são necessárias para o mercado de trabalho, que nos faz ter aqui a necessidade de implementar uma estratégia e ter oferta formativa que permita a educação ao longo da vida e que permita o upskilling e o reskilling da nossa população. E, portanto, tem sido um compromisso e um esforço significativo que temos feito nestes últimos anos, e a este propósito, e porque nos faltava essa peça, havia um regulamento de criação dos cursos não conferentes de grau, mas que não nos dava informação relativamente ao funcionamento em concreto. Gostava de vos dar nota que acaba de ser publicado em Diário da República o regulamento que já contempla toda essa informação para todos os tipos, para todas as categorias de cursos não conferentes de grau. O crescimento tem sido muito significativo nesta área. Nós já aprovámos nos conselhos 206 microcredenciais, já funcionaram, abriram concurso 150, 40 cursos de especialização, portanto o número cresceu significativamente face aos cursos de especialização que tínhamos no passado, muito mais associados a mestrado. 36 já abriram concurso e temos dinamizado de forma muito intensa a Aliança Aveiro Education and Social Alliance. Temos desenhado estas ofertas formativas com parceiros da Aliança em função das suas necessidades, em termos de competências, dos seus trabalhadores. Temos mais de 90 acordos de parceria assinados, o que significa que os trabalhadores podem beneficiar de bolsa de incentivo na sua totalidade, terminando com sucesso as formações, e já fizemos à data 20 formações exclusivamente para parceiros, por exemplo, empresas. Os números, como disse, têm crescido, não só no número de ofertas a concurso, mas no número de vagas que tem subido e o número de certificados também. Percebemos ali algum drop. Estamos a experimentar, isto é um balão de ensaio, experimentar o que funciona melhor. Temos cursos nas mais variadas áreas, acho que é uma das mais-valias da Universidade de Aveiro, em diferentes áreas, para diferentes níveis de qualificação, e precisamos de criar uma cultura de informação relativamente na comunidade e junto dos parceiros relativamente a estas ofertas que a Universidade de Aveiro está a proporcionar, e penso que estamos num excelente caminho. À data já emitimos quase 1000 certificados, mas os números estão a aumentar a cada dia. A mesma coisa relativamente aos cursos de especialização, e depois outro aspecto que também é muito relevante para nós, sejam formações conferentes de grau ou não, é estimular, incentivar, reconhecer o mérito. Portanto, tal como habitualmente temos atribuído bolsas aos melhores estudantes que entram na licenciatura, aos melhores estudantes internacionais, temos atribuído no final do percurso prémios escolares vários, e também no contexto da educação ao longo da vida, bolsas para adultos, mais de 500 já, e estão previstas num outro projeto mais de 600 bolsas, e temos também bolsas que estamos a atribuir para a captação de estudantes para o ensino superior e para as áreas STEAM em concreto. Uma peça fundamental, como disse há pouco, é a internacionalização, e a internacionalização do ensino em concreto. Os números da mobilidade, quer incoming, quer outgoing, mas sobretudo incoming, porque a visibilidade crescente e o facto da UA estar no mapa tem reflexos na procura, e na verdade neste momento estamos a sofrer as dores de ter dificuldade em aceitar todos os estudantes que querem vir para a nossa instituição, e temos trabalhado para estimular a existência, a criação de mais ciclos de estudo, no caso em mestrado, que têm a internacionalização embebida, uma vez que são desenhados em conjunto com parceiros e que envolvem obrigatoriamente mobilidade. Temos também, no contexto dos programas doutorais, 33 cotutelas, diferentes países. O que é que são cotutelas? São estudantes que são, ou o que é que isto envolve? Estudantes que são orientados por alguém da nossa instituição, por outra instituição, por alguém, um docente ou investigador de uma outra instituição, e que envolvem um período de mobilidade de pelo menos 9 meses, e naturalmente o processo tem de ser formalizado, mas é muito positivo porque depois os estudantes têm diplomas das duas instituições. Temos apostado também em 2 outras peças no contexto curricular, e os BIPs também extracurricular, que é o Collaborative Online International Learning. São unidades curriculares ou partes de unidades curriculares que são lecionadas conjuntamente entre nós aqui, em alguma unidade curricular, os nossos estudantes, os nossos docentes e outros parceiros, e os programas intensivos mistos, para os quais temos muito financiamento, portanto, caso tenham interesse, dirijam-se a nós na divisão internacional ou a mim diretamente, e que envolvem uma parte de lecionação conjunta online, mas uma parte obrigatoriamente presencial e têm associados pelo menos 3 ECTS, portanto podem ser conduzidos ou levados a cabo quer no contexto de uma unidade curricular, quer fora, e já avançamos com 15 muito bem sucedidos ainda amanhã, com uma sessão final de que termina, que já vai na 3ª edição. E uma nota relativamente aos parceiros: é obrigatório haver pelo menos 3 parceiros e um número mínimo de mobilidades. Nós temos uma visão, uma estratégia, isso é fundamental para nos orientar o caminho, mas precisamos de quem ajude a implementar e, portanto, o Núcleo de Ensino e Aprendizagem tem aqui um papel central nesse apoio à implementação e trabalha 2 dimensões: por um lado com docentes, o apoio aos docentes, e por outro lado com estudantes. No caso do apoio aos docentes, o foco é no desenvolvimento curricular e na inovação pedagógica. E mais um pouco de história: o primeiro passo deste caminho foi em novembro, 15 de novembro de 2019, em que lançamos um programa de formação e atualização pedagógica, que hoje já todos conhecem, e se à data havia dúvidas se a comunidade se ia envolver, acho que a foto ilustra um auditório bastante bem composto, que excedeu as nossas expectativas, assim como tem excedido as nossas expectativas todo o compromisso dos docentes da nossa instituição. Do ponto de vista do apoio à transformação das práticas pedagógicas ou à melhoria, o Núcleo trabalha em diferentes áreas, não só formação, era o que queria aqui destacar, também tem um programa de observação de pares, apoio individualizado. Como disse o Sr. Reitor, é fundamental providenciar incentivos e reconhecimento de quem de facto se compromete com estas mudanças e melhorias, e, portanto, são várias as peças desta implementação que o Núcleo tem em mãos. Do ponto de vista do envolvimento, o que é que temos visto ao longo dos anos? Temos visto um envolvimento crescente. Temos à data cerca de 21% dos docentes, docentes e investigadores, na verdade, se olharmos só para docentes, são 25%, que já fez pelo menos uma ação dos programas. Temos ali um pico, naturalmente, em 2020, acho que todos compreendemos porquê, mas ainda assim os números são muito interessantes e revelam uma comunidade comprometida com a missão, com esta missão de ensinar, que é central na nossa academia. Só uns resultados muito breves para mostrar, porque achamos que é fundamental avaliar o que estamos a fazer para fazer os devidos ajustes. 78% das pessoas, das muitas ações e das muitas participações, têm intenção de implementar o que ali aprende, porque também aprendemos nós docentes, a curto prazo, e 97%, que acho que é uma expressão muito significativa, recomendaria as formações a um colega. Nós estamos a tentar transitar nesta visão para o ensino e para a aprendizagem de um modelo de mera formação para um modelo de transformação, ou seja, nós não temos garantia e ouvimos muitas vezes os docentes a dizer que foram a uma determinada formação, mas não conseguem perceber muito bem como é que podem aplicar aquelas estratégias na sua unidade curricular e, portanto, temos progressivamente apostado na transformação efetiva, que envolve também formação, mas que envolve também todo um percurso de apoio no desenho da melhoria da transformação, na implementação e depois na avaliação dos resultados. Estamos com a 6ª edição em curso. O nosso foco não são os docentes, são as unidades curriculares que devem ser transformadas. Já foram 25 os resultados de transformação apresentados, mais de 100 docentes envolvidos e quase a totalidade das unidades orgânicas. Esta é uma ação de transformação mais local e genérica, depois temos outras específicas embebidas no programa de formação e atualização pedagógica, e queria só ressaltar que temos também, como penso que todos aqui sabem, muito trabalho feito em consórcio com outras instituições. Acho que temos todos a ganhar, o nosso país é muito pequeno e os recursos pagos, temos todos a ganhar com esse trabalho conjunto e, portanto, no contexto do Centro de Excelência e Inovação Pedagógica, do EPIC, também trabalhamos estes percursos de transformação em níveis intermédios, portanto, para docentes que estão um pouco mais avançados nesta área. Do ponto de vista do reconhecimento, também é a nossa intenção progressivamente melhorar o reconhecimento dado a quem investe no ensino e na aprendizagem. Foi no último plenário, se não estou em erro, do Conselho Pedagógico aprovada ou acreditada o PTUC, o que significa que no PADUA quem completou o PTUC terá essa valorização. E depois, do ponto de vista financeiro, achamos que também é importante, naturalmente, e portanto temos investido em prémios, em projetos de inovação pedagógica, na divulgação dos resultados do SGQ, com os selos de boas práticas, e é um investimento que se requer contínuo. Para nós, os estudantes são parceiros nesta jornada de transformação, takes two to tango, não é? E portanto também os estudantes precisam de estar a par e envolvidos nestas dinâmicas, têm sido envolvidos no PTUC, mas também temos feito sessões dedicadas aos estudantes. Este é o caso da 1ª edição, mas já fizemos outras dedicadas a estudantes de doutoramento e têm sido bastante participadas, e são vozes ativas os estudantes depois a solicitar, a pedir aos docentes que implementem a prática sobre a qual aprenderam nestes contextos. A outra face do trabalho do Núcleo de Ensino e Aprendizagem é o trabalho com os estudantes, quer no desenvolvimento integral, quer na promoção do sucesso e prevenção do abandono, e aqui penso que já todos conhecerão a marca Ser Mais. É uma marca que agrega diferentes programas, quer organizados centralmente, como é o caso do programa de tutoria da UA, como organizados pela unidade orgânica, que está categorizado em diferentes áreas, ensino, cooperação internacional, investigação e ativo. Portanto, as diferentes atividades são encaixadas conforme a sua natureza nestas diferentes áreas, e o que fazemos é auscultar regularmente os diferentes promotores, integrar as atividades no Ser Mais. Já temos várias dessas atividades gamificadas, e depois há toda uma experiência digital pelos estudantes, porque atribuímos badges, e portanto no final do percurso dos estudantes, os badges que eles foram acumulando representam o seu envolvimento na comunidade UA, para além da frequência num curso, e estamos a trabalhar num regulamento para que isso também possa ser reconhecido. Temos já muitos projetos gamificados, 15, e acho que é assinalável o facto de termos já mais de 10.000 badges. Neste próximo ano letivo vamos fazer não um dia de acolhimento, mas uma semana, porque entendemos que é mais facilita a integração dos estudantes de uma melhor forma, e toda a semana vai estar gamificada e associada a este percurso. É o primeiro passo, são os primeiros passos dos estudantes na instituição, e portanto desde logo vão estar imersos neste compromisso, ou nesta jornada com este reconhecimento. Outra nota que vos queria dar, e prometo que estou quase a terminar, trabalhamos também no contexto do Conselho Pedagógico na organização das atividades que são reconhecidas, são mencionadas no suplemento ao diploma, organizá-las em função das categorias do Ser Mais, porque não sei se têm noção, mas o suplemento ao diploma é assim um conjunto de atividades sem grande sentido, e que fica difícil para os potenciais empregadores compreenderem o seu impacto e as competências efetivamente desenvolvidas. Portanto, trabalhamos no Conselho Pedagógico, junto com o Núcleo de Ensino e Aprendizagem, esta categorização, e naturalmente tudo o que consta no suplemento ao diploma e que tenha sido aprovado pelo Conselho Pedagógico deverá estar no C+. Há algumas atividades que não foram aprovadas no Conselho Pedagógico para constarem no suplemento ao diploma, mas que podem estar e devem estar no C+. O outro aspecto, só voltando atrás, para nós é importante identificar, a informação vai sair ainda esta semana ou no início da próxima, para os diretores das unidades orgânicas, para a associação académica e tudo mais, para a comunidade, vai ficar disponível para a comunidade. É importante também perceber quais são os responsáveis por informar os serviços de gestão académica, para que depois o registro seja efetivamente feito, de modo a evitarmos que sejam os estudantes a pedir, e aqueles que não pedem não têm menção porque não pediram. Portanto, essa identificação dos responsáveis para nós é também importante. Os espaços, como disse há pouco, também têm sido alvo de investimento. Portanto, começámos com o SALT, que eu acho que já nos dias que correm ninguém desconhece o SALT, e temos apoiado diferentes unidades orgânicas. Estamos ainda nesse exercício. Ainda temos algumas oportunidades de financiamento que nos permitem ainda generalizar mais esses esforços, e vamos também investir no complexo pedagógico, que tem também dificuldades várias, não só em termos de mobiliário, que não é flexível, mas também uma série de outros aspectos mais estruturais que precisam de cuidado. Tudo isto tem sido muito impulsionado, está tudo alinhado com a visão para o ensino e aprendizagem, mas naturalmente que tem sido muito impulsionado por projetos que temos conseguido, para os quais temos conseguido obter financiamento, e que estão todos eles alinhados, são peças deste puzzle maior, estão todos eles alinhados com esta visão. Desde logo o Impulso Jovens Teen e o Impulso Adultos, o Impulso Mais Digital, que tem 4 projetos associados, e depois o Programa para a Promoção e Saúde Mental no Ensino Superior. Tudo isto, e nesta fase em concreto, requer que pensemos na sustentabilidade de tudo o que estamos a fazer, e todos os projetos foram construídos a pensar nisso, mas chega à altura em que, por exemplo, do ponto de vista dos recursos, importa perceber que recursos precisamos de continuar a manter para que estes esforços não fiquem pelo caminho. Desafios futuros, o caminho é para a frente, não é? Temos muitos ainda, de facto, desde trabalhar mais a paridade de estima, o reconhecimento da missão de ensino na progressão dos docentes. É uma luta que não é só da Universidade de Aveiro, não é só de Portugal, mas que é importante. Temos também o desenho dos cursos e a inovação curricular em função da inteligência artificial e das competências que são necessárias para esse efeito. Precisamos também trabalhar, e há uma série de outros aspectos que exigem de facto ainda muitos esforços, e hoje à tarde hoje de manhã vamos estar a ser inspirados pelo William, e hoje à tarde vamos estar a ser inspirados por todos vós para aquilo que vamos estar a fazer neste futuro mais próximo, e portanto para podermos continuar então este caminho. O Sr. Reitor já falou um pouco do programa, os e-posters estão aqui fora, e agradeço-vos muito a paciência. Obrigada.
Bom dia a todos. Cumprimentar a Vice-Reitora, a professora Soares, e cumprimentar todos os que estão aqui hoje disponíveis a ouvir-me e a perceber em conjunto comigo que parte é que eu posso adicionar a este Fórum de Ensino e Aprendizagem. Acredito que o mais importante seja a minha visão sobre a aprendizagem, porque de ensino ainda não tenho nenhuma experiência, nunca preparei uma aula, nunca tive de enfrentar um grande auditório com muitos estudantes à procura de, através de mim, aprender algo inovador. Por isso só posso dar a experiência e falar um bocadinho da experiência do que é estar sobre o outro lado. A verdade é que vou tentar ser sucinta, mas as opiniões e reflexões que tenho sobre este tópico são muitas, e às vezes torna-se um bocadinho difícil condensar ou organizar, mesmo dentro da minha cabeça, estruturar como é que tudo isto pode ser passado, porque o processo de aprendizagem e o processo de ensino é algo que é estruturante, quer seja na primária, no pré-escolar, no ensino básico, secundário e no ensino superior, é algo ainda mais diferenciador. As pessoas estão aqui porque escolhem, porque querem conhecer sobre aquele tópico, porque têm um interesse que foi despertado e procuram, dentro de pessoas que são especialistas na área, obter essa informação. Há 50 anos atrás tínhamos um ensino que em muitas partes, e mesmo dentro desta universidade, permanece igual, mas era um ensino que resultava porque tínhamos 10 estudantes numa sala de aula, era muito fácil falarmos, muito fácil os estudantes terem uma proximidade, construírem uma relação com o professor, e dentro deles não havia nenhum entrave, não havia nenhuma barreira. Atualmente, o que verificamos é que continuamos a ter uma sala com a mesma disposição, metodologias de ensino bastante similares. No entanto, em vez de termos uma sala com 10 alunos e com a possibilidade de criar relações com os docentes, temos uma sala com 200 alunos. Falar para 200 alunos, acredito que seja intimidante. Para 200 alunos conseguirem ligar com o professor é muito difícil. O ritmo de evolução é cada vez maior e é necessário existirem técnicas e metodologias que permitam esta ligação, que permitam que para o docente seja fácil captar a atenção dos estudantes e que, por outro lado, seja fácil os docentes estudantes conseguirem estar atentos, recolherem a informação que é válida, não só para aquilo que é o percurso profissional, mas também para aquilo que será o seu percurso enquanto vida, enquanto cidadãos, porque acaba por ser esta um bocadinho a formação e aquilo que tentamos fazer ou que vimos procurar à Universidade. Acho que é importante refletirmos que aqui na Universidade de Aveiro temos realidades muito dispares. Temos, por um lado, as pessoas que acredito que estejam nesta sala, que estão motivadas, que querem fazer diferente, fazer melhor, que querem ligar-se e conectar-se com os estudantes e que querem que uma aula não seja uma aula, seja um processo de construção de pensamento em conjunto. No entanto, por outro lado, temos também muitos estudantes que não têm esta oportunidade, que o processo de aprendizagem não passa por uma construção em conjunto e evolutiva com os docentes, passa por 1h30, 3 horas às vezes, de um débito constante daquilo que é a formação que atualmente qualquer estudante consegue procurar se for pesquisar online. Isto representa um grande desafio. É importante termos momentos onde os estudantes também são colocados à prova e percebem que não existe um método de ensino ou um método de aprendizagem. Existem imensos métodos de ensino e imensos métodos de aprendizagem. E a forma como eu aprendo certamente é diferente como a forma de outro colega meu aprende. Isto é a beleza do sistema de aprendizagem e do sistema de ensino, que é conseguirmos adaptar ou escolher uma técnica que vá de encontro àquilo que são as dificuldades, as realidades e os objetivos de cada um dos estudantes. Porque a minha visão dentro do meu curso certamente é diferente daquilo que é a visão de outro colega meu. É importante que o ensino e que o processo de aprendizagem possa ser moldável e que não esteja fechado dentro daquilo que é o expectável, o que era implementado há bastantes anos atrás. Temos um desafio muito grande num futuro próximo, que é as novas tecnologias, a inteligência artificial. Vamos ter uma geração que teve uma quantidade de estímulos completamente diferente, com uma capacidade de atenção de 10 segundos. E a questão é como é que esse estudante vai para uma sala de aula e consegue estar a ouvir algo que facilmente encontraria online. Como é que vai conseguir estar atento a algo que é mais do que 10 segundos? Como é que conseguimos resolver isto? É uma relação, são precisas duas partes quererem mais. Por um lado é preciso que os estudantes conheçam, exijam mais e sejam ativos e não se sentem na sala de aula fechados no telemóvel, só a fazer de conta que apontam. Por outro lado, é preciso também capacitar os docentes para reconhecerem primeiro esta problemática, porque é preciso reconhecê-la, ela existe, e depois em conjunto trabalharmos para a solução. E trabalhar juntos a solução não é a comunidade de docentes, é a comunidade académica. Enquanto estava a vir para aqui, fiz o exercício de vir a pé e pensar um bocadinho sobre o que é que poderia vir aqui acrescentar. E um dos pensamentos que me surgiu foi que isto é de facto assustador, é desconhecido, é desconfortável. Nós podíamos continuar com as mesmas práticas há 10 anos que resultaram, o trabalho ficaria cumprido, grande parte da matéria estruturante da unidade curricular não sofre assim mudanças de uma forma anual. Então, por que não aplicar aquilo que apliquei o ano passado, há 5, 10 anos? Porque de facto eu cumpro o objetivo, eu estou a transmitir a informação. E isso seria o confortável. Mas a realidade é que estamos numa universidade, o seio da investigação, do querer mais, onde o desconhecido não é sinónimo de receio. O desconhecido, por outro lado, é sinónimo de incentivo. Estamos aqui numa comunidade onde não existir uma resposta é um fator de motivação. E como é que conseguimos fazer isto de um ponto muito bom em termos de investigação e como é que depois não conseguimos transpor para uma sala de aula? Como é que este caminho e este pensamento se fica dentro de um laboratório e não passa para aquilo que é um contexto de sala de aula? Por isso, o meu exercício, que não é só para a comunidade docente, é também para a comunidade dos estudantes, é não temos de ter medo do desconhecido. Temos sim de enfrentá-lo e deixar que este receio que às vezes paira sobre as palavras de interdisciplinaridade, de inovação pedagógica, nos motivem a querer e a fazer mais. Eu penso que, se tenho mais alguns minutinhos, só para passar para uma reflexão importante sobre aquilo que o ponto fulcral e o que é importante na aprendizagem. Eu já terminei o meu mestrado, já concluí, e ontem estive numa conferência onde tive de apresentar alguns dos resultados que fiz ao longo dos passos do mestrado. E era em inglês, algo bastante fácil. Eu consigo comunicar em inglês, consigo escrever em inglês, consigo interpretar e compreender. No entanto, senti uma dificuldade enorme em apresentar os meus trabalhos científicos em inglês, porque tinham tempo cronometrado, porque tinha de falar mais rápido do que é habitual. Eu consigo falar muito rápido em português, mas em inglês tinha esta dificuldade. E o que eu senti foi que, e a minha reflexão foi, durante os 5 anos que eu estive aqui na UA, nunca me foi pedido para eu fazer uma apresentação em inglês. Isso nunca foi algo ao qual eu fui, nunca foi impulsionado, nunca tive esse desconforto. E se eu tivesse tido esse desconforto ao longo dos meus 5 anos, eu ia chegar lá e certamente não iria estar nervosa, não iria ficar incomodada com a pecinha que passa aos slides, que isso meteu uma confusão enorme, ainda me atrapalhou ainda mais. E iria ter uma capacidade de interagir de uma forma muito mais leve, muito mais, de uma forma muito mais fácil de me conectar com as pessoas que estavam à minha frente, do que na realidade me vi obrigada a ficar presa aos meus slides, ao meu texto que tinha. E eu sei falar sobre os meus resultados, da mesma maneira qualquer estudante sabe falar sobre aquilo que fez ao longo dos últimos anos. Mas a realidade é que estava numa posição de desconforto. E se essa posição de desconforto não tivesse sido apresentada durante o meu período de ciclo normal, eu estaria muito mais capacitada para aquilo que eram desafios. Atualmente, eu não tenho muitos problemas em falar de forma livre sobre algumas temáticas, nem de estar aqui. Mas isto também não foi algo que foi o meu curso que me capacitou. Eu venho de uma realidade, se calhar bastante diferente daquilo que são as práticas pedagógicas inovadoras. Venho do departamento de Física, onde a matéria as cadeiras acabam por ser sobre temáticas mais antigas, falamos sobre física, falamos sobre química, peças estruturantes. E, de facto, é difícil. Eu não conheci inovação pedagógica até entrar para a associação académica, até ir a um fórum da ICIU e perceber tudo o que é este mundo, tudo o que é feito, como é que se pode ensinar de forma diferente. E da mesma maneira que eu não tive, muitos outros estudantes têm este percurso, onde o pensamento não é construído, o pensamento é incutido. É isto que tens de saber e não é isto que vamos aprender em conjunto. Acho que é isso que faz de facto diferente, e é que são estas reflexões que temos de ter. Há uma parte muito grande no percurso que não se constrói dentro da sala de aula, muitas valências que não se constroem dentro da sala de aula, a comunicação, toda esta parte de gestão e todos estes novos interesses, eu não os descobri no meu curso. Eu descobri-os quando saí do meu curso, quando me coloquei em posições de desconforto. Para mim, o meu curso não era desconfortável. Eu tinha algo que me guiava. Eu tinha um professor numa sala de aula que me dizia: é isto, isto e isto. E isto, infelizmente, é o confortável. O desconfortável era o professor colocar uma solução e dizer: então agora vais encontrar a pergunta. porque era completamente disruptivo. Quem sou eu para saber qual é que era a pergunta inicial? Acho que o percurso, quer seja de ensino, quer seja de aprendizagem, é muito maior, é algo que tem que ser disruptivo, é algo em que todos temos que estar numa situação de constante desconforto, sair fora daquilo do que é expectável e procurar ser mais e fazer mais, porque certamente sentados numa cadeira só a ouvir-nos será muito mais difícil termos reflexões mais profundas e reflexões mais construtivas. E penso que é isto, é assim que termino e espero ter contribuído de alguma forma sobre reflexões mais sobre aprendizagem do que sobre ensino. Obrigada.
Acho muito difícil falar logo a seguir à nossa Vice-Reitora e à Joana, porque a Joana adorava ter o teu poder de oratória, juro. A parte boa é que posso agradecer já a tocar imensos dos tópicos que eu agora até vou falar e várias das coisas que, por exemplo, que a Joana estava agora a falar. Eu até tenho aqui algumas. Não são respostas, eu não tenho respostas. Eu sou só mais uma pessoa que gosta de pensar sobre isto e tentar trazer resposta, tentar aplicar algumas soluções e testá-las, mais testá-las. So I will switch to English if you don't mind. I speak better in English or faster than in Portuguese, and I don't want to take you all your time. So my name is Sandra Vieira. I'm from the Department of Medical Sciences, and I don't know if I thank for being invited to speak here because it's not comfortable for me, because, and this is my first disclosure, I am not an educational researcher, I'm a biomedical researcher. So I brought you this picture because this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I love. I do neuroregeneration, I do microscopy, this is a nerve, and you see, for me I would like to be in a microscope room, very dark, nobody else, music, and looking at my pictures interpreted, okay? But I'm not only a researcher, so I'm also a biomedical teacher and a PBL tutor. And just to say, yeah, I always say to my first-year students, I'm PBL tutor of first-year students, I always say that they have to get out of their comfort zone, and that's the only way to learn better, but not too much, if not it's too, it's stressing and don't learn anything. But okay, we can talk about that later on. Okay, so I'm almost 20 years of teaching experience, and what I think it's a teaching of proximity, respect, mutual respect, I hope, and to try to incentivize curiosity and to try to guide the learning experience. So it happened that I won the prize for Best Educational Pedagogic Innovation of the UA with this course, Therapeutic Cellular Therapy and Regenerative Medicine. Just to tell you, it's me and Bruno, and we get along very well. We teach and co-coordinate this course of 2 hours TP, a lot of students, not 200, but really, I understand what you say. Divided in 3 classes, and I just brought 2 or 3 slides to just say how we structure this course. So we structure like this. I don't know if you hear me. So we have 3 modules, and this module is more basic, so it's more expositive classes, and we try to keep the concepts and applications of regenerative medicine, and it has a an individual test. So this is your individual evaluation, these are in group. So the second module is an advanced journal club, where they try to integrate and consolidate the knowledge. It is in groups of 5, and they try to synthesize a paper on regenerating therapy for organic system. And then we have the seminars with experts, invited experts. So it's like trying to increase complexity and the depth of the knowledge they learn. This is the last slide of this course, don't worry. And it's just to say that we have some active methodologies. So the first, we do some periodic formative assessments, and it's very important. I think the way that I can get to 80 students is to engage them in collaborative but competitive also moments. Like they divide in 3-4 groups and they compete to try to answer to my questions. And this is a formative moment. And this is to, not to be, you know, the exposure classes are terrible, and we have to have some dynamic moments at the end. And actually, it's very good to identify doubts and reinforce learning. And then we have the Advanced Journal Club. I call it advanced because they don't limit to resume and present a paper, but they have to apply the knowledge they learn to advance the field. And that's something, this challenge they love, really. We just implemented this 2 years ago, and they really like. So they have to, okay, this is the paper, the authors did this, and now for us, we should, I think they should do this next, okay? They should go and test this or apply that, this biomaterial, these cells or what. And they do that also with the help with IE tools. So what I decided 2 years ago is to start to introduce some IE tools and to talk to them. Some of them already teach me how to use some new IE tools and how to use them. And together we try to look to the output of these tools and see, okay, how to apply my critical thinking to this, because this cannot be the end point. This has to be a middle, some help, just help, not till the end. And then in this Advanced Journal Club, they also do peer assessment. And I think it's a very good experience to do. Okay, then we have these seminars, and in all of this we have what I told you about this collaborative evaluation. So the seminars, for example, I do a quiz, and they have to answer to that quiz in small groups. And actually, it's the last class of this course, and I really adore it. I adore to look at them discussing completely. They are learning at that moment. It doesn't matter for me if they have 10 or 15 or whatever. In that moment, they are not only being evaluated, but they actually are taking all the doubts and do a lot of peer instruction. It's something I believe, the peer instruction. Okay, and I just put this slide because there's nothing bulletproof. It functions with one class, it doesn't function with the other. Just this year, for example, I had a class that had a lot of interpersonal relationships, difficulties. They didn't like much each other, and they, in my evaluation, they hated that I gave extra points for the peer assessment. So something that worked so fine in the 4 editions before, it was terrible for these guys. They said, we didn't like that. It's like 2 or 3 values over 20 value grade. It was given by our peers, and we didn't like that, and things like that. So sometimes it just doesn't function, and sometimes we can try to adapt to the next year, but not in that year. But we have a lot of internal and external influences, like the synergy with our fellow teachers, and me and Bruno is great. He also, for example, in the individual test, we do a lot of different ways to assess the learning and the objectives. And Bruno, for example, he introduced the crucigrams, palavras cruzadas. So it's a very nice way to also to assess some of the knowledge. But then we have some things that make our life more difficult. For example, the students hate. I have 2 hours in each class, okay, each set of students. But then when I invite the speakers, I'm not going to tell them to give 3 lectures, the same seminars. So I have to bring the class all together. And the students, all the years, I have this, they complain that sometimes I have to change the schedule, and they hate it. So it's not easy. It's not easy. Okay, so the second part of my talk today, I was challenged to think a little bit about the challenge and opportunities of our learning and teaching and learning in the current world. Well, I have a second disclosure. I ask Perplexity, that's the AI platform I use. So let's talk, help me please, what should I talk about, how and what you think? And then I will give my input to what he delivered. So the first thing that he think that we should talk about was active learning and student engagement in a changing higher education landscape. Oh, nothing this is new. Already Sandra talked about it and even Joanna approached it. So in this one it says, okay, you know one of the key challenges is sustaining engagement post-pandemic. And I was thinking about, I also wrote about what Joanna was telling, that it's very difficult to grasp the attention of the students and maintain it for more than 10 minutes or something. It's very difficult. And I think we have to understand that it's not possible to have a student engage 60 minutes. And that's it. And if we understand that, we don't feel break and we can think, okay, no, okay, if I have this attention and that group and then that group, okay. And if they learn at the end, it's good enough. So what it says, okay, student engagement and motivation in hybrid or digital environments. I have to tell you that from my experience, it's easier with medium, small size classes. For example, in my master, when we were in COVID, I had master students that were in pajamas. And I said, don't worry, I can be in pajama next class also, and we can bring coffee, do whatever you want, just discuss, let's discuss things. And it was not easy with the big, like in CCMR, of course, with the big students, with the big classes. With the bigger classes, I had to do something like practical assignments and interpretation of data and divide to conquer. So divide the rooms, small groups, and assign tasks to them. And this is something that I implemented during COVID, and I use nowadays the interpretation of data, for example, and I will talk about later on. So, because I can ask like, what do you think about this technique? And I can put a graph where they use this technique and ask, how do you interpret this? And it's really, really different, and it's better to engage more the students in the second one. It's much more difficult, but actually prepares them much better for the real world. Okay, another challenge, diverse student needs, and Joanna was also talking about it. So how do we adapt teaching to support varied learning styles? We have completely different persons in 80 students class. And I think first, you have to respect them as human beings, as you like to be respected. But some things I have to tell them, you know, as I respect it, sometimes you're not happy and you have some problem in your life, you have also to respect that. And sometimes it's not that easy. Students always look to what are their, not their duties, but most of the time they also look at what they, what's the word? Dever direitos. Their rights. Thank you, Jorge. Okay, so, I try to diverse my teaching learning methodologies in this course, for example, any other courses that I lecture. And some of these techniques may have some overlap, but they are complementary. And actually, I do this in like I told you, to try to increase complexity and always pick up the knowledge they learned before, always integrate it, apply it, always in the second and the third round. Of course, you can have unexpected receptiveness fluctuations from class to class, like I have, and we cannot do much about it. We can always try not to maintain the same things for 10 years and try always to adapt. We don't need to change everything every year, nothing like that. But you have to think about it, okay, what went wrong? What could function globally, okay? Because, for example, this thing that happened, well, that happened. I'm not going to change because the other 4 or 5 editions like it. So I will maintain the peer assessment in the journal club. Okay, universities are often, I love this, are often expected to do more with less. This is for some. require innovative teaching strategies that are effective yet scalable and sustainable. Yeah, they expect everything, yeah? So really, who would have thought? We're not alone. I think that we deserve some acknowledgement also. Okay, and I thought, yeah, particularly in terms of time. We don't have time. I don't know about you, but I don't have time. I wanted to reflect so much more. I wanted to do so much more, and I really don't have time. So try to improve efficiency in design, and for example, having help for people who know how to do it. And actually, Sandra was saying some stuff, and I was writing already, oh, I have to do something. I have to talk to her about this. So thank you very much. Oh, my precious time. Okay, and what are the opportunities? Not only challenges, but also key opportunities. And it says, okay, active learning strategies, like the ones we are discussing, of course, such as problem-based learning, that I really adore, peer instruction, hands-on project. Everything is there, I subscribe. And agree as tested, okay? And PBL for me, it's great, it's really great. And for the first year students, they hated it in the first two classes, but then they realize at the end, and I have a lot of people employing our students that say, they are really great in these transferable skills. They are really good. They don't have, maybe they don't learn much more than the other, they are in the classical learning mode, but actually they learn how to communicate, how to discuss, how to present, how to search, because we are very, we talk about every of these steps, which kind of source is good, and we are really bad, I think, saying, no, this is not a good source. How come you bring that source? How come you don't know how to reference that source? You know, they are challenged to be really good in what they do in this PBL. Okay, peer instruction. I was laughing about you saying that you are from physics, because yesterday I was looking for a 5-minute video from Eric Mazur that talk about peer instruction. He is a professor of physics and applied physics in Harvard University, and they said they didn't hear anything that the students didn't hear anything that he said. And then suddenly he stopped and realized that education, it was not just a transfer of information, and it was more than that, and then they put some groups discussing in between each other, and the class was now is a guiding. Another active learning strategy project, hands-on projects and project-based learning. We will try to implement that next year. That's something I have to talk with Sandra about. Because we are maybe too much optimistic, I don't know, but so me and Reitor, we co-coordinate this master, and we are we're trying to do some project-based learning in 2 courses that go hand by hand, side by side in the second semester. And in the course at the 2 courses actually at the left, in the materials department, they're going to do different biomaterials, different devices, and then when they come to me, they have to test this with cells and all. Test if they are safe, and to see if they have the actuation, what we expect from them, okay? And so we'll try to do some project-based learning. I hope it functions, and I will have your help for that, of course. Okay, other key opportunities. Courses and symposia provided us, faculty, with practical tools and framework. Okay, great, that's where we are. We just talked about events like this one that can help us. And actually, the university has been very active, as Sandra showed. I am getting these faculty acquainted with several learning methodologies, so well done. And maybe they have already 25% of the professors, the faculty already engaged. Maybe we can, I don't know, showcase in each department. I was thinking about it. We can discuss that later. Inclusive and agile leadership. I really, when I look at this key opportunity, I thought, well, this is really great. I think we, not only the students, it's all about the students to make them good leaders. It's really important. But actually, I think we should also have this kind of courses. Okay, we can discuss what we have or if it's not, but really, I think it would be really great. Okay, what are the active learning techniques that we can use to answer this challenge and and get to use these opportunities. Engagement by design, for example. So structured courses that require student participation, real-world problem solving. We use that in PBL. ECIU has that's its face. So it's what it does. ECIU network. So we are in the good way. Then I deliver me this. Hybrid and flexible delivery, like offer both computer-based and online options, allowing students to engage in ways that suit their circumstances and learning preferences. For me, this works with mature students. It's not that easy to offer everything, and then usually the more immature students, the ones in the first years and second, sometimes they don't deliver, I have to tell. At least from my experience. Feedback and reflection. Incorporate frequent positive feedback and opportunities for students to reflect on their own learning. As I told you, I use every evaluation I give, for me, every time that's a moment for them to learn. Okay? And the feedback, it's also a moment where I always give feedback to my students, and they really enjoy it. They always tell me that they enjoy this. Okay? Okay, the second and last, so it was 2 topics. The second topic, of course, IE, talk about IE. So, embracing IE and digital transformation in university teaching. Key challenges. The elephant in the room. Integrating IE into pedagogy. Universities face the challenge of moving from restricting IE in the classroom to actively integrating in teaching and learning. Okay, we know, all of us that are here, we know about this. There's a tension between maintaining academic integrity and preparing students for a workforce where IE is ubiquitous. And this is the truth. They have to be, we have to prepare them. They will have to be knowledgeable in IE. If not, they don't have a future. That's it, and even us, okay? Oh, sorry. And that passes by faculty preparedness, and I thought you were talking about it. Yeah, many instructors are still developing the skills and confidence to use AE and digital tools effectively. And yes, we need that. So I've started, but I don't know as much as I should to teach what is AI. I started because my boyfriend loves AI and he's telling me about AI for 3 years. Okay, before it was something that everybody talked about. And that's why he pushed me, you know, all the time he was saying, you know, there is this tool, every day. You know, there is this new tool and things like that. So, but I don't know what, yesterday I was going to look some softwares, and yesterday I was not here, I'm sorry. I went for a revision of a PhD thesis, and we talk about this at lunch, of course, about what are the best platforms for research, not also for education. And there was like a bunch of 10 new platforms, and it's difficult. We cannot be aware of all of them, and maybe we should not try to. We should just try to understand what are the criteria we should look for to see if it's a good platform or not, and how to use it. In these terms, what are the bad and the good that comes from it? Okay. Sorry. So other challenges, equity and access, ensuring all students have access. I think University of Aveiro is very good at that. Assessment and academic integrity. So the rise of generative AI, how we're going to, how we're going to maintain how learning is measured and how authenticity is ensured. Well, okay, teach the students how to use it in a good way, but also do some different assessment. For example, I do with the graphs, and I try not to ask them to deliver me what is this technique or what is this concept, but actually I give them things for them to apply that knowledge, to interpret and to write data and formulate and do calculations and things like that. And for me, that's what works. And actually, for these students, they have to do journal club in English. And they hate me, I have to tell you, they hate me, but it will be better for them in their lives. Okay, last 2 slides. Key opportunities in AI. Adaptive learning pathways, tailored content and feedback for the students' engagement. And I think this is on their side, and I think also, and they know. And for us, I help in grading and scheduling. Okay, that can be good. I like actually to do some questions on thinking, so I do 2 or 3 integrative questions all the time. But there are some other types of questions that you can help us to grade. Global collaboration, this is something very good. Allow students to collaborate globally, like in the COIL program, internationalization at home and other, and I think it's very good. We do it already some, and I think we should really put some of our bets, our money on this. Curriculum innovation, of course, like Sandra was saying, new course formats and other, with interdisciplinary learning and aiming for future skills. Okay, and this is more of the same. So he's talking about what are the active learning techniques we can use to go and face that challenges. So AI-driven simulation, AI chatbots, adaptive quizzes, this is really interesting. And use AI to create the questions also. This combined online and in-person activities, actually, I look at this more in a way, this for me is the tricky, this is the most tricky. For me, this is something that I'm going to try to embed and develop, global cross-institutional group work. And that's it. Sorry if I passed more than 15 minutes. I hope that it was not that boring. Thank you.
Break agora, voltamos às 10h50. 5 minutos depois da hora.
Well, folks, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe I should have got my Portuguese for good morning. But my name is Will Carey. I am really delighted to be here. I must say, to begin with, I want to say a couple of thank yous. Ruben, obrigado for the invitation. Joanna, Sandra, obrigado for the welcome as I arrived today. I was really excited, even in the conversations just at the side before we started, to hear about some of the work that's going on here in Aveiro. And I just said to Sandra just before starting, even my basic Google Translate of Sandra's slides, they were in Portuguese. I was taking pictures of the slides to understand a little bit of the context. And I probably could have rewritten my presentation 3 or 4 times because of the excitement that I saw and the work that you're doing here. Sandra, again, thank you for your slides. They were in English, obviously. I could take that. And many of the things that have been talked about already, I'm going to talk about from my own perspective. And today, what I'd like to do is pose some questions. I hope we might, at the end of today's session, find some better questions to ask. And maybe we'll get excited about some possible opportunities in response to some of those questions that you pose. I just want to say a little bit about what context I'm proposing these questions in before I get you to do some work as well. And so I met Ruben in Leuven maybe a couple of months ago, and that was at the European First Year Experience Conference. That is a conference that I chair. It was in its 19th year. We will be hosting our 20th anniversary conference at the University of Szeged in Hungary in June next year. And I'm sure that Ruben and others can share with you the information about that. EFYE, for short, European First Year Experience Conference, is a conference that has maybe 350 or 400 colleagues from across Europe and internationally who cross over in their roles. They come from teachers, from counsellors, from developers, from policymakers, researchers, immediate graduates, senior leaders, but all with an interest in how do we enable the best first-year experience possible. And that first year from the moment that they start to arrive or think about coming to join us to the moments that they're exiting out into second year or into their next year of study. My role at Lund University is a part-time role, and one of the things that has defined my career is the use of peer learning and the use of peers to do peer learning, near peers, so those students who are maybe 1 or 2 years further down the road, which is slightly different, but uses many of the same principles that we were talking about with the peer instruction discussion earlier this morning. And in that role, I work with universities across Europe to help them implement, train their student leaders to be educators, to be facilitators of these study groups, and also to evaluate the impact of that work. And then my main role is at Nottingham-Trent University in the UK. It's an inner city university. It's more of a teaching intensive than a research intensive institution. And so that means there's maybe a particular demographic of students who are there. And my role there is to lead a team of educational developers who will support predominantly staff, not always staff, but predominantly staff, to think about their learning and teaching. And so similarly to your Teaching and Learning Centre, we have an open programme of workshops and sessions. We have guides. I'm hoping that I can get my hands on some of the guides that you're talking about here, and I can take them back and share them with my colleagues. We also run the training for new colleagues who are new to learning and teaching through a postgraduate, certificates in higher education. And we're just about to launch, and it's a project that I've been leading, and I was interested to see the micro-credentials, but micro-credentials for staff, for any staff who teach or support learning. And I will use that phrase quite regularly, teach and or supportive learning. Because just because we may not be on a stage, or we may not be leading a discussion around the particular areas of the curriculum, but that does not mean that we're not enabling and supporting learning, and that's part of my talk today, to think about who are the educators. And I should also say, I'm going to use the phrase from another colleague back at Nottingham Trent, that I am a little bit of a magpie. I don't know if that word translates. Magpie is a bird in English, it's the English word for a bird, which sees something sparkly, it sees something exciting, and then wants to go and get that sparkly, exciting thing. And I'm going to try and be a little less of a magpie today because of the things that I've heard. I might go off at little tangents, and I'm going to try and keep myself on track so that we've got some time for conversation and discussion at the end. I was also asking Joanna, she was talking about something to do with slides in her talk and a clicker not working, and I understood that then that was to do with the speed of talking. And I'm from the north of England. Traditionally, people from the north of England speak quite quickly. My Swedish colleagues tell me or ask me the question, why do the English use so many words when they could say so few to say the same thing? My apologies in advance if I become too English and use many words to say something that is quite simple. So, I hope this will work. I hope that you have maybe a mobile device. If not, I've got a link if you've got your machines with you. But this is a link to a Mentimeter. And I am, in our time together, I'd like us to think about what might be some new spaces for education. Where might you be collaborating with those you might not yet be linked with, or perhaps you could currently see opportunities in a different context. And so if I switch slides, just bear with me a moment. There we go. So just to help me understand who's in the room, what sort of role are you based in? Okay, in order to get the code now, if you just on a web browser on your mobile, go to menti.com, and then if you can see the code up there, 29665886. And already, with the opportunity to select more than one role, I'm suggesting that maybe we are more than just a single role. Our role is part of who we are, but it's not all who we are. And that's something that I want to try and follow through in the discussion. So, I'm going to move on, because there's a little bit of thinking. So in what settings or contexts or situations does education happen here at UA? Where is education going on? It could be a place, it could be an environment, it could be a project, I don't know. From your context, where is education happening? Okay, so a lot happening in the classrooms. It's going to... But also spaces outside of classrooms. Education in that intersection between university and industry. In all of the universities I've worked in, there's those partnerships between the university and maybe where the students are going on to placement or research collaborations taking place. Focused on real-world contexts. The idea of authentic assessment, maybe. The opportunities to apply my learning into a role that I might be heading into. In my role in Ireland, I worked in a technological university, and it was driven around the future roles that our students would be graduating into. Pedagogical innovation activities. I wonder if my hope is that is thinking about education of educators. That's what I'm reading that to be, in a hopeful way. Because maybe we are both learners and educators at the same time. And in a way, preempting that discussion, in those examples that you were talking about, those examples that you put there, who are the educators? Here, company managers. I'm maybe thinking that's connected to that university-industry collaboration space. Those managers have things that they're trying to bring in to maybe into the curriculum. And helpfully for me, some of you have either been very kind and picked up an early thread of my conversation, but we've also got students in there, peers in there as well. Thank you if you've picked that thread up and you've put it there for me to anchor something in. And if not, thank you anyway, because we're going to head into those conversations now. So I'm just going to switch back. Great. I should say that in my talk, the only piece of tech is Mentimeter. I decided that to include videos at the same time would be too much stress for me. So we have some quotes from colleagues and from students and from collaborators, but there's no sound and there's no video today. But before I get started, I want to just share a little story with you from 2006. I'd been in my role, I graduated from the University of Manchester in mathematics, my undergraduate in general mathematics, and my postgrad I'm in theoretical and applied fluids, and I started a job working in a centre similar to the Teaching and Learning Centre, working on a programme around peer learning, about how students support the learning of each other. And I was working with some computer scientists. And I can remember 4 of their faces and their names still. So I'm going to be talking about Johan from South Africa, Tom from the north of England, Dovell, who was a mixed heritage, and Dave. And they were great friends. And they'd all signed up to be peer leaders. They'd all been trained to run study groups, to act as facilitators, not to answer academic questions, which was a bit frustrating for those first-year students, or so the first-year students thought. And as those leaders, Tom, Dave, Dovell, and Johan, as they were working, they met regularly with their lecturer, Graham and Suzanne. Graham and Suzanne were doing some of this work a little bit under the radar, because at the time, in a research-intensive institution, it wasn't cool to be doing learning and teaching things. It wasn't the thing that we did. So but they knew it was making a difference to their students, so they were doing it under the radar. And they were meeting with these four. And the lads were sharing things that had been talked about in the sessions. And that meant that Graham and Suzanne could think about adapting some of their lectures to address some of the areas that the students were finding challenging. But what you saw over the time that these people met together is that they were exchanging not just, here's some feedback about what's been going on in the classes, but we, the lads, Dave, Double, Johan, and Tom, they were coming up with new ideas about how to get conversations working in their small group that they were facilitating. And Graham and Suzanne, the lecturers, well, they were starting to take some of those ideas and bring them into their own larger lectures. And then Graham, in his role, he was the director of studies for the school. So he had an overview role. And part of his role was to think about new curriculum. In the UK, we call it periodic review. So they're going through a process of reviewing the curriculum and is it still fit for purpose? And Graham, being the innovator that he was, said, we need Tom, Dave, Dovell, and Johan. We need you on our periodic review panel because you've got ideas about education. And so, for me, what was happening there, I had a moment of realization, and it started to ask the question, when is a student not a student? And part of that was around, did I have a preconceived idea of what a student was and what a staff member was? And I wondered, how much was I equating the roles and functions that existed? So was I saying that a staff, that was the educator role, and a student, they were a learner, and there was no blurring of the lines between them? And it was a moment of realization for me, but just there's a bit of a health warning here. I didn't realize that's what I was thinking at that time. It was a lot later that it came on. But there was something that had bitten me, and there was an itch that I needed to scratch, because it was seeing that students and staff could be more than what I perceived them to be. So, fast forward. 2025, Leuven, this friendly chap comes down to talk to me after I chaired a session. Would you come and talk with us at the University of Aveiro on our Learning and Teaching Day? Thank you. I think it's important. I look around the room, a number of us are wearing glasses or wearing spectacles. Those lenses cause us to look at things in a particular way. They cause us to focus in on things. And our own positionality, our own context will frame how we focus in on things. And so I just wanted to spend a brief moment telling you about my positionality, my context, which then I hope will help you see a little bit more about some of the examples that I want to share. So, I'm of UK heritage. I had strong family support to go to higher education, both in terms of finance, but also in terms of motivation, care, and interest. I am a number of years, quite a few number of years now, out of university, and yet this morning I had a message from my mum, my dad, my brother, saying, hey, good luck today. I hope they're a friendly bunch. So I got strong family support to do that. And I went to a research-intensive university with, in the UK context at the time, very low tuition fees. That's changed now. But I started to realize some of my privilege with those things, with some of those experiences and some of those supports. And yet, I was almost an attrition statistic. I was almost a dropout, because I didn't feel like I fitted. I'm not sure if one of the graphs that you showed was around continuation rate. I couldn't quite work that out. But the continuation rates, retention rates are a huge focus in the UK and in other places. How are we ensuring our students can succeed? If we accept them, I believe we have a moral responsibility to help them succeed, because by saying you're coming in is saying we think you have the capability to succeed on this programme. And at the time, I didn't realise my privilege. I've worked in 4 institutions, both research-intensive and teaching-intensive institutions across the UK and in the Republic of Ireland. Most of my roles would be classed as academic-related. What does that mean? It means that I often feel in tension. I often feel like I don't fit in, because I'm not full-time lecturing on biochemistry or mathematics, and I'm not full-time administering stuff. I'm in the middle. But when I was doing my own research projects around learning and teaching, I found a space that has been classified third space. Roles in the margins, in the grey spaces, and it helped me to feel like I connected. I've been in roles related to student engagement and development, and also academic or educational development, predominantly staff-facing. And it's why I partly felt an affinity with Ruben when he was talking about the Learning and Teaching Centre, that you have this overview. And my role and time in Ireland was a similar space. My boss at the time headed up our Learning and Teaching unit and our Student Engagement unit. And the space that I get really excited about is the space in the middle, where they blur. I've done policy work, I've lectured, I've moved around, and the thing, Joanna, that I forgot to put in here, and I'm ashamed to say, is that my role within the Students' Union as well. And I was never an elected officer, but I was part of a permanent staff team there to support our elected officers. We had 8 full-time elected officers, about 20 or 30 part-time officers, and then a staff team, a permanent staff team who were there to enable the officers to support them in their work, a permanent staff team of around 30 to 40. There was a lot of resource placed into student unions. Well-placed resource, in my mind. But I also have a European reach. And it's the spaces of intersection, the marginal spaces, that give me energy through my European work. I talked already about being the chair of the European First to Experience Conference. I would love to talk more with you about that over lunch, if that's something that's piqued your interest. A small little plug. We have a 20th anniversary special edition of a journal coming out. The call for abstracts for that closes on the 20th of July. There's still plenty of time to get a 300-word abstract in, and I'm sure that Ruben will share the information for that. But I also work, as I said, at Lund University on a programme called Supplemental Instruction, or Peer-Assisted Study Sessions, which is adopted in around 15 different countries in Europe and around 30 countries worldwide. More of that later. So, that's my context. How do I think about education? At the core of my practice is the belief in the power of partnership, of appreciative inquiry, of valuing the views of others. Now, this started in my work around peer learning. It democratized approach to education. But also, more recently, as I said, in that sort of third space area. My approach to leadership, both my want of the people that help to lead me and the teams that I lead, is that it's adaptive and authentic. I like people who are honest, who tell me, hey, we've got a challenge here. How can we solve that? I don't mind where that comes from. It can come from my Pro-Vice Chancellor or a new graduate in the team. It doesn't matter. Adaptable, authentic leadership. And I prefer to move away from individual leadership to a more collective style of leadership. And I think that is empowering for many in HE who, sometimes in the roles that they're in, don't necessarily feel that they have that power. And so those that do have power, how do we share that? Because I think that brings people closer together. I'm very much focused and was smiling away when I was hearing all of the discussions around active learning. Seeing your SALT spaces looked fantastic. It encourages the learner to be active, and as an educator we should be facilitative. It feels a little bit strange for me, but I accept sometimes we have to do it, to be in a tiered space, in rows, and all the energy, all the eyes are focused up here. Working in conversation spaces is more of my preferred style. And tied to this, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, I hope that I am searching out ways for those ideas of partnership and co-creation. Where are the practices that I can infiltrate into, that I can help to transform, and in many cases inform my own work as well? It's the magpie, the shiny, sparkly things again. Where can I do that? And two words that are central to my own work and will form part of a lot of the rest of the session are content and process. So the content, what's the vehicle that we're using to engage whomever it is? That's often related to the initial motivation to engage. Why am I going to turn up to something? And then the process, the way of engaging. How are we doing it? What is happening? Maybe, just maybe, so that the culture is changing, the learning culture is there. And often, and maybe this is a little risky to admit when I think there's a recording going on, is that I'm far more interested in the process internally. I'm a little bit sneaky, I don't know if that's a little bit tricky with people, that I will get them in for the context, and then the process is the thing that I'm focusing on, so that practices, perceptions, and cultures can maybe change. So, the rest of the session, what I'd like to do is just share with you two, if I've got time, three examples of where I can see partnership and co-creation are infiltrating, informing, and transforming. I'm going to try and share three, if I can. One that has more of a curriculum focus, one that has a more co-curricular focus, so it's still related to sort of what's happening in the classroom, but it's not directed or mandated in any way. And the third one is a more broad institutional approach. I'm not saying that these are all the answers. I would be going against my own set of values if I did. I'm not going to theorize too much about that. I'm going to tell you practically what we did and how I saw it change and influence colleagues, my student colleagues and my staff colleagues in the spaces that I was in. And with each one, it starts with an orange slide, and you get a little snapshot of the activity and the results early on. I give some of the game away right at the very beginning with the voices of my colleagues. Not audio. I'm going to be taking on multiple personalities in the comments that I give, that I share. The first one is a project in Ireland called Reimagining Assessment and Feedback Together, or RAFT. And we were keen to find out who would get on the raft with us. This was, the words here are from a colleague in our business school. It was one of the people that I taught alongside actually when I was there. And I'm going to read it out. I think it's important people's voices are heard. I always thought assessment was done to students, but have realised through RAFT I can now do assessment with students. It's the process piece. We got him in for the assessment. He left with a change in mindset of how he worked with his students. So, how did it work? I'm conscious that I've got maybe quite a lot of words on the slide. It's my way of trying to give you anchors if my northern accent kicks in or my northern speed kicks in. So we can debate that whether it's good pedagogy or not to have lots of words on a slide, but you'll get the slides and take them away afterwards. So it came about as a part of a national funding project to do with learning and teaching enhancement. This was part of a wider bit of funding in Ireland at the time. Each year we managed to bring in maybe 350, 400,000, and we dedicated a portion of that to RAFT. And it's now in its third iteration, and it's embedding into activity. I can talk more about the embedding as well, because I think the sustainability of these ideas, how do we train people up, support it and build it into current projects, that is crucial if we're going to then to be able to innovate the next phase. What was it? It was a year-long staff buyout CPD programme. The buyout there is really important in this context. Colleagues in Ireland who were full-time lecturers were contracted to be somewhere between 16 and 18 hours in the class. So it was 1 hour of timetable and then 1 hour to do everything else connected with that. Having been in a part-time role teaching, wow, that's intense work. So the buyout for colleagues was important because it meant that they could have time focusing on developing new ideas. 1 hour a week was contact, structured sessions, 1 hour a week was independent study. We adopted with this project an action research approach. But what were we doing it on? Well, the reimagine, what does that stand for? The reimagining was about colleagues identifying and hopefully solving an assessment and feedback challenge. The A and F, assessment and feedback, it was reimagining a particular assessment and feedback challenge. We had projects focused on peer assessment and feedback, standardising rubrics, assessment criteria co-created with students, feed forward and exemplars, as well as programmatic approaches. And when I say programmatic, I mean in a whole course. So the degree that the student is seeking to deliver. And also reflective practice. The together happened in two ways. One, Together 1.0 was a community of educators, a community of staff learning together. Together 2.0, there was two things that they had to do. If they were signing up for this programme, in order for the buyout, they had to collaborate with their learners in order to solve the challenge. It couldn't just be something that they did on the side. So really, it's enacting partnership or co-creation through that. So you remember I said content and process. What I'm trying to do with each of the examples is show you how did we get people into the space and maybe what were some of the outcomes from that. So we got people into the space because we were developing resources and materials for the whole group. We were drawing on the work of Cathy Boville around co-creation, of Naomi Winston and David Carlos around assessment design, and of Joanna Tai and others at Cradle in Deakin University in Australia in terms of evaluative judgment. But we were also incentivising and addressing a need of staff. Assessment and feedback is an ongoing challenge. Almost universally, when you look at student satisfaction or student surveys, assessment and feedback is the one that dips. So we were drawing staff in to try and address that. But through the process, I co-led this project with another colleague in the Learning and Teaching Centre. We knew that we wanted to set a space of trust and bravery with those colleagues so that they would try, there was some conversation about feeling discomfort, feeling unsettled. And we talk about that for our students, maybe we're thinking learners, but how much do we talk about it for ourselves as educators? Maybe there's a blurring of the lines there. Maybe we're educators and learners at the same time. So we built this space of trust and bravery so that they could experience it with their peers, their staff peers, and then take that into their individual projects with their students, starting to become a little bit uncomfortable with the people who I'm meant to be standing up in front of and saying this is what happens. So we're just trying to bring those stress levels down. And that required a lot of coaching and mentoring of the individual staff to support and apply those concepts. So what were some of the results? Over the last 3 cycles, more than 60 staff, 43 different interventions who've been published, presented on, posters available, more than almost 2,500 students impacted across the campus. This is a campus of around 15,000. So we're looking at sort of 30% or more impacted just in these times. And that's direct impact. So it's the intervention on a particular module where there might be 200 students. What we can't quantify is the impact as it ripples out. So the staff who are on this programme, we can't say how that's changing their view of how they interact with learners in another setting, or how they change their module in another space, the assessment in another space. We saw an increased confidence and awareness of assessment and feedback practices for students and for staff, and also a shift in the perception of staff working with students. So I'll end this example with two quotes. A standout moment of realisation for me, this is from a colleague who works in music technology and music performance. A standout moment for me of realisation was when I was carrying out my intervention was the quality of feedback that students were giving to one another. In quite a few cases, it addressed issues that I would not have even considered myself. How the feedback was phrased was also really supportive, very constructive. All in all, they exceeded my expectations in terms of the quality of the feedback they were giving one another. And when you spoke to the students about this, they were saying because it was a formative feedback point, they spoke, yes, it was great about helping me. It was good to see what the people were doing. But you know what? It really made a difference when I did my final assessment. I changed the way that I did my reflective piece because of what I had read for other people and also the feedback that I'd given. And this is sort of an extended quote from the first orange slide from my colleague in business. Truthfully, it's something I would have been very cynical about prior to involving myself on the RAF programme. I guess I would have been old school and thought that lecturers set the assessment and the students take the assessment. Being involved in RAFT, it's challenged my mindset and changed my thinking around this. I now see the benefits of student co-creation in relation to assessment, in that it provides us with a more energetic student and a more enthusiastic student. I probably should have put a health warning here. If you want energetic and enthusiastic students in your classes, adopt some of these practices. If you want passive learners, don't. But reading some of your strategy and some of the projects that you were presenting yesterday, Google Translate was very helpful. Reading some of those, my sense is that you want active learners. You want engaged and enthusiastic students. So how do we engage in dialogue with them? Okay, doing well. A little bit more about this model of supplemental instruction or peer-assisted study. So the RAFT project, predominantly focused within the curriculum. And interestingly, there was just a little extra bit, there were two types of ways that students were being involved. And this ties into some of Kathy Bovill's work around where are we engaging students. In some cases, the lecturers were involving students who'd already taken that course to help them refine it, so they weren't current students of the programme. But in the majority of cases, they were doing the work with students who were going through that programme at the time, or going through that module at the time. A really good example of that was a colleague in sports science who did it on his final year dissertation module. And as the students were preparing each stage of the submission of their dissertation, they were co-designing and co-writing the rubrics. And they've done that every year since. For staff, it means going back. It means relearning each time. It means walking along the road again, potentially looking at the same view, but trying to look at it in a fresh way. Anyway, back to SI Pass. Two here. These are both actually from student leaders. I think both of them from Lund actually as well. But when we read this, I wonder how much of this might chime with our own experience as staff or our own experience of students working with other students. The students were expecting answers most of the time. It got better at the end, but it took some time for them to stop doing that. This peer learning model, these facilitators, these trained students don't answer academic questions. So you might get the question from first years predominantly, why am I going to go? You're not giving me the answer. There's many other things that they get. Another leader. It's been most rewarding to see the students getting seriously engaged with the literature in discussions with each other, and to see them to try out different ideas of interpretations for each other. Wouldn't we want that in our own learning spaces? Wouldn't we want that? And just that word seriously there. One extra bit. Student from archaeology, who was a leader at Manchester with us, called Chris, said, you know what I like about PASS? Chris was a bit of a geek. He was a self-confessed geek. He loved archaeology. He said, you know what I like? It's serious fun. Serious fun is going on. Well, what does that serious fun look like? It's happening around a table. It's happening with a small group of students. It's happening with more experienced students, in the sense of students who are maybe in the second or third year. Acting, it says they're role models. One of my colleagues, Michelle Morgan, if you've not looked at Michelle Morgan's work around transition, I'd really strongly recommend that you do that. I think I've included her in the reference list at the end. Michelle talks about, she doesn't like the word role models. She likes the word real models. People who've lived it. They've done it. They've found it tricky. They're not afraid to share where they've found it tricky, but they also know that you can get through it with a little bit of dig-in. So, yes, it's about supporting academic assistance. It's on the timetable, it's weekly, it's scheduled. So I turn up early on, because it's on my timetable, hopefully. It does something quite clever. It integrates the what to learn, the things that are maybe tricky in the course, maybe threshold concepts, things that we can't change. They're part of what it means to be a student in mathematics. For me, I attended PASS as a student. It was one of the things that stopped me being an attrition statistic. And I hit a barrier when around proof. Particularly, it was proof by contradiction. Didn't get it, and I thought I was the only one that didn't get it. I went along to the sessions. My two leaders were there. I can still see their faces. And they got me talking with the others in my group, and we'd all got bits of the puzzle. The leaders did two things. One, they gave us the confidence to put the pieces of the jigsaw on the table. And two, they asked us questions to help fit those pieces of the jigsaw together. In many ways, it's not rocket science. And in many ways, it is absolutely mind-blowing as to what goes on when you see it happening in the sessions. And when I'm training staff in other universities to implement this in their own space, they attend the training, come in, because they want to do this for their students. They leave equipped to do it for their students, and almost without fail, regardless of role, regardless of length of time in their role and at their campus, they go, do you know what, I'm going to change some of my teaching. I'm going to change some of the way that I do things because of bringing in some of these methods. Importantly, it is not a remedial approach. It's not for students who are struggling or failing, they may attend, but it is also for students who are excelling. Because actually we exit, and because they might be excelling in one way at one time, and then they start to hit a wall. I can remember one student, Kieran, he spoke actually an awards evening that we had. He spoke and he was telling us as a first year why he went along to these sessions. Now Kieran was quite a confident chap. He was probably towards the upper end of his year in his capabilities. He told us a story about first year that he said yeah, I learnt a lot in first year. I learnt how to do my washing. My mum did my washing for me before I left home, and I learnt really quickly that I don't put my red t-shirts in with my white t-shirts because I wear pink t-shirts afterwards. But he also said, I went along to pass. He said, he was confident. He said, I sort of got the maths that we were doing in life sciences. I got it. I knew. And he was talking. He said, but do you know what my leader did? This trained higher year leader. Do you know what they did? He said, they got me to explain how I understood the topic. They got me to talk it through with the people in my group. And do you know what? I sort of understood it better. I knew it already. But I understood it better. I had a deeper understanding of the learning. It's that active learning principles, that peer instruction coming into place there. I could spend a whole session. We spend 3 days working with staff to train them to do this. I'm going to move on. But just to show you what's going on in Europe around this now. This is from a recent report that we published from the centre. We've got over 1,000 supervisors trained across Europe, more than 160 institutions operating it. Every year, at least 7,500, 8,000 students are acting as leaders across Europe, working with around 75,000 students who actively participate in those sessions. And it's offered to almost 140,000 students in different places. When I think about some of the ways of how that discussion happens, what's happening around that table, it democratises dialogue. It recognises value in more, rather than me, how do I bring what I can bring, confidence, and how can I have the humility to understand what other people are bringing? How do I listen to other people? How do I negotiate and understand what I learn and how they learn? And I think if we can be training more and more students to be doing that, having better and deeper conversations, that starts to address some of our moral responsibilities institutions around socially responsible institutions, around providing space for graduates to develop social responsibility, social justice type events. And looking at the SER plus, SER plus piece, some of those skills around that, you could start to see there was a lot that chimed with that for me. But how does it look? What does it look like practically? Because actually it's also about how do we embed these things? If we think it's good, how do we build it? There was a model that we developed at Manchester on the left-hand side. It had a three-line, three-bullet point approach, centrally coordinated. It was run and coordinated through a central team to ensure the quality, but also to ensure sharing of good practices. But it was owned by the discipline. It was owned here. They were the ones who set the direction, understanding how it worked, so that it addressed the needs of the discipline, and it was led, importantly, by the students. It grew over time. It started off really small. By the time that I finished in 2016, we had all first-year students and many more higher-year students able to be engaging in some form of peer support. It was the first institution in the UK to be able to do that, and was set as the UK benchmark a number of years ago. Content and process. Students are going because they can consolidate, review, develop the competencies in the core areas of the course material, and improve their academic performance. Leaders are going along because it's building experiences that are going to support their current and future academic and professional lives. There was a note on one of the slides earlier on around transversal skills. Those T skills, those communication skills maybe, those wider skills that we need in order to bring disciplines together to operate in that interdisciplinary space. That's what's happening here. And staff are getting real-time informal feedback about what's going on in their course. Because it's a safe environment for students to say, do you know what, I don't get it. Because there's no assessor, there's no teacher in the room. But there is an educator in the room, the leaders, structuring the learning. What's happening underneath? What's happening in the process? Leaders are developing a stronger relationship with staff, meaning that they're exchanging educational practices. During the COVID pandemic, this happened really strongly. Leaders were coming up with new ways to do learning online. And suddenly you saw an equalising of some of the power dynamics because the leaders were innovating and the lecturers were learning from their fellow educators. And the leaders are building capacity and confidence to share their voice in educational experiences, which means that they can feed into future institutional developments. Do you remember the computer science story of Tom, Johan, Dovell and Dave, who started out as leaders, think they enjoyed their roles, and they were contributing to periodic reviews? That's this happening in practice. And then a final example. This is something that I started work on at Manchester when I was in our Learning and Teaching Centre and was recruited to carry on doing with our Students' Union as well. It was bringing together voices across the whole institution. The focus is how we engage students and staff in progressive institutional conversations. And then Megan, an international student. When I came to university, I was searching for my voice. I wanted to know who I was and found this in the consultations, the work that we did. They offered me the ability to say, this is what I think students want. This is what we want from our university, and it is a partnership. It's not a catchy name, it's the truth. Another health warning. The opportunity for structured disruption is likely. If you start to redress, equalise some power dynamics, be careful. Why was it going on? We were receiving increasing requests for Tom and Dave and Dovell and Johan. Those super engaged students, staff were realising maybe students are more than people to sit in my lecture theatre. Maybe they're colleagues that we can work with to improve the institution. Their insight, their challenge, and actually the unanticipated solutions that come from putting people around a table, of rehumanising. We've got these badges on today. I've left my university badge in my car because it helps me to get into the car park. But on it, often these university badges have a descriptor. It might say undergraduate, postgraduate, lecturer, administrator, manager, contractor. I don't know. There's all different things. But actually, what some of these processes do for me is rehumanise and say, yes, that's part of who I am. That's some of the expertise that I bring. But I'm also a human, and I've got lots of other things that I can bring into the life as well. So it was providing spaces for students and staff to engage in discussion. And this was the sort of the broad model that we had. And there's an article that you can read if this one, you bite for this, and we're not going to talk about it for a long time. But the work is not hierarchical. In that, basic feedback and survey results isn't at the bottom for me, and these partnership discussions are at the top. That's not what I think. It depends on the situation. For me, and I wasn't putting this in because I worked in the Students' Union, it was something I felt strongly about, that student representation, that elected role of both within the discipline and at the Students' Union is central to all of this. So there are different methods that we identified to do this. Again, this was 10, 12 years ago, so I'm not saying this is new. You're doing many of these things already. But we talked about some of these dialogue opportunities being a little bit transactional, and that's okay, because we can engage loads of students in that through questionnaires. But as we move through into more consultative practices, workshops where students and staff can enter into dialogue about particular things, advisory boards, where they're supporting the development of new initiatives, policy development, new buildings, campus redevelopment, through to partnership, where you've got students and staff working together on projects and researching together. And maybe you would add others based on your own practices. If you've got some of those in mind, hold them. In about 3 or 4 minutes, there's a Menti-Me to close out the session. But how might we apply these methods in a practical way? I've just talked through some of those. And again, I can share the slides. But what was going on here? What was happening, particularly, and I say this particularly for staff, It was providing a structured way to support engagement in conversation that felt safe. So for some staff, they were already halfway across the river because they were doing loads of this already, but this provided them with another step to go and do more of it. It gave them the confidence to take a bit of a leap to try and engage students in different ways of conversation. This example is much broader. It's not a specific example I gave, it's an approach, it's a framework that we developed. So the content, it was varied by whoever was driving the activity. It might be that someone who was updating an assessment and feedback practices. It might be, as I had one of our deans come and talk to us, we were doing an entire restructure of a faculty. Massive piece of work. Would we support that with this type of activity? Yes, we would, absolutely. Policy development, with our medical school, we were doing a lot of work on our fitness to study and fitness to practice policy, as well as a multi-million-pound library rebuild project, which won an award for the way it operated in terms of its stakeholder engagement. This approach was part of that submission. But what is going on underneath the surface? It's safety through an agreed approach and aims. But there's a hidden byproduct that suddenly, I've got that structure, so I feel safe. And then when we start to have the discussion that comes from the structure, oh wow, now I'm starting to learn a bit more. I'm starting to connect a bit more. But it provides that safety for people to do that. And what it does, as I talked about with the badges, it challenges the perception of the roles. So, to conclude, where's all this heading? What are others saying about this? People who've influenced me, Alison Cook-Sather, students are bringing their expertise at being students in that unique intersection. Staff are bringing their content, their practice, their pedagogical expertise. Mick Healy. Peter Felton talks about students and staff working side by side. They're modelling these socially just forms of engagement that recognises people being humans. Their lived experiences contribute to that understanding. And so can this challenge our perceptions as to student and staff roles, and perhaps we're considering spaces where educators and learners can be occupied by the same person? So what am I arguing for? What am I preparing for? Why is this? I could have spoken on many different things, but why this at the moment? Well, I'm arguing that students should be co-inhabitants of the third space, that margin space, that grey space that I mentioned at the beginning, that many of us might operate in. I'm arguing, as Peter Felton does, that students could be educational and academic developers. That requires a mindset shift. I'm suggesting that we can, through some of these practices, when we question who are our educators, we can rehumanise and look beyond the role or the ID badge. But also acknowledging, preparing for the fact that this type of work intersects both pedagogy and politics, because it's challenging power. It's challenging established power. And with that comes, as Alison Cook-Sather talks about, a need to consider respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. I don't speak Portuguese, but I did hear you talk about it takes two to tango, I think. I don't know in what context that was, but I'm taking it that it requires, if we think about it as a binary thing, and I desperately don't want to, but if we think, we need all people to step into that space with respect, reciprocity, and responsibility, know what needs to happen, and where those of us who have more power acknowledge that, we sometimes need to take the first 2 or 3 steps to destabilise that, to bring that down and say, this is okay. I want to understand this. I had a lovely dinner last night, and one of the conversations that came up there was about how we might lead our teams. And there was an example shared with me that said, well, quite often if I'd got a problem, I would say, I've got a challenge, what can we do about this? I'm not sure. Changing the I to we, being part of the solution as you're going through it, being humble enough, but also being confident enough to say that I don't know, for me, has worked wonders in opening doors and just letting things, particularly as we were talking about around first years. We have an opportunity to put our best educators in front of first years because they're coming in curious. They're coming in like they don't know what's going on because this is a new space. So we have an opportunity to practice some of these things and do these things. But in order for that to happen, and this is where those of you who clicked on leadership roles in that very first slide, are the structures in place to do that? Can we do these innovations, these collisions, bringing people together and developments, how can they occur well? And as some colleagues had written, at the very least, we ought to pay greater attention to the extent in which institutional structures support or discourage partnership work, co-creation work, rather than simply position it as an option for people to choose to take up. How is that happening? And maybe it's time we employed more of a transitions pedagogy approach, which goes back to that table. People sitting around the table, who am I as an individual, what do I bring? So I said that there were some questions, there was maybe some curiosities that I was interested in. For me, and it's back to the Mentimeter, for me, where are these things already happening at UA? They are, I'm sure. Some of these things I've said have triggered ideas that you're already doing. And you're thinking, well, Will, what you said, we're way ahead of that. Great, I'd love to know more about that. But then also for you, what are you curious about now for your own context? Where are the opportunities to co-create education in its multiple settings, in and beyond the classroom? And so I will move us on to that. I'd hoped that we might have maybe 5 or 10 minutes for questions. I apologise, we've got 2 or 3 minutes for questions. But those are my thoughts. They were, Ruben said, be provocative. I hope that there's been 1 or 2 little ideas that have sparked up, either that consolidate what you're already doing, or that maybe push you to think there are other ways that I can be working with colleagues. But I think I'm getting close towards lunch, so I'm going to leave it there and just see if there's any scope for discussion or contribution to this. Thank you. If you're tapping something in there about what you already do and want to share it, I think there's a microphone down here, so it'd be great to hear some of those things as well. For a non-UA person, PTUC? Ah, okay, yeah.
Where students are invited to act as facilitators.
Great.
That's not always easy to have that there.
Yeah.
So that's part of the thing. From our side, we are not having the right approach. Also.
And it's how you build that, isn't it? It's how you build that as a culture, both within the student body and the staff body, that these are things that and that staff saying, hey, have you thought about this? As well as students seeing it, seeing some of this dialogue, some of these conversations as part, just generally the way that we do things. It comes back to that structures piece. Are the structures in place to do that? going to move this slide on in about 5 or 6 seconds, just so you can finish any last ones that you were doing. Yeah, TBL absolutely setting that culture. We've just finished a major project at NTU about that, and seeing students demonstrably increasing, significantly increasing academic behavioural confidence in that. And I will. So what are you curious about for your own context? Where are the opportunities to be trying some of this in different ways? And if there were any questions or comments that people wanted to make, I'm happy to take those. But I'm also conscious, Ruben and others, that we're getting close to the end of the, I think it was it. Oh, okay. Well, in which case, add away, or if you've got questions or comments, I'd be really glad to hear them. No? Great. Well, folks, I really appreciate your time. It is warm in this room. I'm starting to feel a little bit hot in my jacket, so it's probably telling me that I need to get some water and a little bit of fresh air, and maybe we head for lunch a little bit earlier, but I'm around if you have questions or things you want me to expand on in more detail. I've got a full reference list at the end, and I'll certainly share the slides with Ruben to share out afterwards.
Can you talk a little bit more about the conference that you're organizing? For next year with the.
Yeah, sure. So the conference itself is a conference that will potentially, I think, probably will exceed 400 people next year. It will be only the second time that that's happened. It's going to be hosted at the University of Szeged in Hungary from the 10th to the 12th of June. It brings together people who have an interest in ensuring that the first year experience is the best that it can be. And it's holistic in that respect. So it isn't just for teachers who teach first year courses. It isn't just for colleagues that run peer mentoring programs. But it brings together researchers, policymakers, leaders, students, yes, teachers, yes, student counsellors, employability teams. We had quite a large number of access and sort of disability or access teams come in, and it is a space. I'm obviously biased. I chair the network, but it's a space that is very accessible. I think it is designed to be both for people who are coming to a conference for the first time, and people who are seasoned conference goers. So we had certainly second year students presenting at the conference, as well as vice rectors presenting. There was a growing, I'm delighted to say, a growing number of people from Portugal who were coming, and I think that's representative of the fact of the work that's going on in the country at the moment around higher education. It was delightful to see that, to bring another set of perspectives in. The format, I'm hoping some of this is helpful to you. The format is, there are different ways that you can engage. So you could submit for a traditional paper session. Maybe you've done some research around first year practices. Maybe you've maybe you're someone who introduced an assessment and feedback change in your course, and you've evaluated the impact of that. We're delighted to hear that. Maybe you are someone who's starting out with an idea and wants to get inside information from people. We both experienced EFYE colleagues as well as new EFYE presenters really value a format called show and tell. It's a 5-minute pitch. here's what I'm doing, and then you get 20, 25 minutes of people coming to you with ideas and suggestions about how they're doing something similar. Some of our most experienced colleagues choose that session because they use it as a space to generate new ideas from, this year we had 28 or 29 different countries represented, including South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Canada and America, our honorary European colleagues, and UK colleagues who are sort of part honorary Europeans. The theme for this conference moving is Roots and Wings. So it's about where are we putting down roots and how are we embedding practices and how then does that flourish. So a big focus around impact evaluation. What do we know works and why do we know it works as well? Yeah. It will be in Hungary.
It would be in Hungary next year, in
Next year, in
2026?
2026. So the 10th to the 12th of June in Hungary.
And the abstract is this month?
That's thank you. You've given me a chance to do 2 advertisements.
Okay.
So the advertisement for the EFYE conference, the call for abstracts is not yet out. That will happen November time,
yeah.
with a submission probably around January, February. However, if you are someone who's doing something a little bit different with first years, or maybe you've got a perspective on first year experience in your context, then there's the EFYE journal, special edition of the journal, and that is a 300-word abstract for the 20th of July. If people want to talk more about that, I'm really glad. So there's a whole range of opportunities there, but case study examples, we've got vignettes, little small elements of practice, again designed to be supportive of people who are stepping into this space for the first time, as well as research papers. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.